After Ethan returned to the family, I saw an anonymous online poll asking whether a man who cheats feels more guilty toward his wife or his lover. The lover had as much as 99% of the votes. I turned to Ethan and asked, "Do you think so too?" He set his book down and looked at me, a detached gaze laced with a wariness he couldn't name. "Lily, I've already come back," he said. "What more do you want?" He got up and went out to the balcony to smoke. I looked over. Against the bright city lights, his tall, lean figure dissolved into the thin mist of smoke, looking desolate and bleak. Half an hour later he came back in, wearing a smile that was all forbearance and appeasement. "There's a company family day coming up. Go with me this time. It's on the weekend and I'm off. I'll take you to the mall to buy a few things." Ethan's company holds family days from time to time, but he never used to take me. If I asked about it now and then, he would frown, impatience all over his face. "Those are benefits arranged for the rank and file. Spots are limited. As a senior exec, I should be considerate. There's no need for me to compete with them." In this moment, I really wanted to ask, "So we don't have to be considerate this time?" But I didn't. Ever since Ethan moved back, a heavy sticky something has hovered between us, like a gummy lump lodged in my throat, neither up nor down, yet always reminding me it's there. "Okay," I said. He smiled as if pleased, but as he turned away, the smile fell, and he let out a barely audible sigh. That night, just as I turned off the light to sleep, the door pushed open, and Ethan came in. "Are you asleep?" We've been sleeping in separate rooms. He's in the study. The day he chose to return home, he stood by the door with his suitcase and said to me, "Lily, we both need time and space to settle down. Let's not share a room for now." Back then, I was still flooded with extreme emotions. The raw hurt of being betrayed by the person closest to me. The self-disgust at my own crazed behavior after we'd torn our faces off. The lofty superiority of standing on the moral high ground. Every movement and expression of mine had become distorted and magnified. I lifted my chin and sneered at him. "What are you thinking in that silence? That I let you come back just to do that with you? Do you think everyone's mind is as filthy as yours? Fine, if that's what you want." He didn't argue. He just said, "Okay," quietly, then dragged his suitcase into the study. Now he stood beside the bed and watched me for a while, then lay down. His hand slipped under my shirt from my waist and he murmured, "Lily, we're still husband and wife." His voice was a little husky. Strange, such a simple sentence, and I couldn't even see his face, yet I could plainly feel the grievance and compromise, the sighing restraint threaded through his words. It was as if he were the one taking the initiative to ask for me, only because he had no choice but to bow his head to fate at last, as if the still intact marriage pained him, as if I, the wife of 10 years, were receiving a reluctant favor. Outside the window, the tired, indifferent moon looked down on the world. I still couldn't hold back and spoke the name I hadn't uttered in 3 months. "What about Danielle? Isn't she the only wife in your heart?" The air froze at once. In the dark, the man behind me burst out in anger, his voice sharp. "Why bring her up? I've already come back. She and I have taken the punishment we should take. You've gotten the outcome you wanted. Lily, what more do you want?" "I don't want anything," I said. "I just can't help it. I just feel wronged. I just want to rip off the layer of pretense that's been smothering my life." Ethan and I were classmates in college. We met at a campus event and fell in love, got married the second year after graduation, and the following year had our daughter, Mia. Everything unfolded naturally, like water finding its course. I've always been the outgoing one, lively, cheerful, quick to laugh. I've always enjoyed being around people, while Ethan was more introverted. His research skills were among the best in the field, but because he wasn't good at socializing, his career never seemed to move forward. I thought it was such a waste of his talent, so I used my own gift for networking. Through my supervisor, I managed to connect him with one of the senior leaders at his institute. During that time, I woke up early every day to bake desserts and traveled across half the city just to deliver them to the leader's mother, who loved sweets. Ethan found what I did beneath him. "My abilities speak for themselves," he said dismissively. "Do I really need to stoop to such petty tricks? If this all comes to nothing, you'll just make me lose face." I carefully protected his scholar's pride, sincerely admitting that I'd been a bit reckless, then laughed and said, "If it doesn't work, that's fine too. At least I'm showing respect to the elderly." Besides, getting to know someone like her could also help with my own career. The senior leader appreciated my persistence, and with Ethan's undeniable research talent, she personally endorsed him during a crucial promotion. After 5 stagnant years at the institute, Ethan finally received the advancement he deserved. His salary and bonuses rose sharply, but because he now had to juggle both research and management, work became increasingly demanding. With no one left to care for the household, and Mia entering a critical stage in her growth, we discussed it carefully and decided I would step back from my main position, taking on a supporting role instead. That way, I'd have more time to look after our family and daughter, and I could give my full support to his career. I always thought I was fortunate. Whenever I went to pick Mia up from kindergarten, the other mothers would gather to chat, and they all agreed that my family was a model of modern happiness, first love that had lasted, a strong emotional foundation, a husband with a successful career, myself with a light workload, and a lively, adorable daughter. I felt happy and content. Sometimes, when I saw colleagues who had once lagged behind me getting promoted and earning raises, I felt a faint pang. But I told myself that family is a shared economy and destiny. Yes, I gave up some things, but for the family, that sacrifice was worth it. That was enough. The first time I saw the name Danielle was on a research report sitting on Ethan's desk. At the bottom were 2 names, Ethan and Danielle. I handed him a cup of herbal tea and joked, "Your names actually match pretty well." Just from the sound of them, you could imagine some dramatic love-hate romance. Back then, blinded by the lies of my own life, I didn't notice the fleeting tenderness in his eyes as they brushed over Danielle's name. "She's a single colleague. Don't make jokes like that," he said curtly, lowering his gaze as he set the report aside. The second time I saw Danielle's name was half a year later. I was making a PowerPoint for Mia's elementary school presentation. My laptop had run out of battery, and since Ethan hadn't come home yet from a department dinner, I used the computer in his study. While searching for materials in WPS, I accidentally clicked on his cloud storage. There, I saw a folder named Beloved. Ethan was always extremely meticulous. The folder was divided by year and month, neatly arranged into 27 subfolders. Human intuition is a strange thing. Before that moment, I had never suspected Ethan of hiding anything inappropriate from me. Not the slightest thought of it. But as I moved the mouse to click one of those folders, I realized my hand was trembling uncontrollably. I sat there quietly for 2 hours. Inside Beloved was the record of a man and a woman's secret emotional journey that had lasted for 2 years and 3 months. Subtle yet burning. They had originally been colleagues from different departments, assigned to the same research project. From then on, countless days and nights were spent together in spirited discussions and soul-deep exchanges. Slowly, one grew moved and the other fell in love. They knew well that their relationship was unacceptable to morality or society, so they promised each other a purely platonic love, no physical intimacy, no surrender to base human desires. Perhaps under the pretense of the so-called moral restraint, they gave themselves permission to bare their souls freely, to release their affection without reserve in this secret Eden. Ethan called Danielle the only wife of his life. One of his words read, "When you walked past me today, I caught your unique scent." My heart trembled fiercely. The world's women are tainted by impurity, but only you are the pure, immaculate place where my soul can rest. "Thank you for purifying my life," Ethan had written. "On countless nights I could only think of your face, repeating your name again and again in my heart. I once grieved for the 33 wasted years of my life. Then you appeared, Danielle, like a quiet miracle. Suddenly, all the past became worthwhile." Danielle called Ethan brother. "Brother, my lover, my husband. This morning a few strands of my hair fell out. I carefully placed them on your desk. You and I can count it as having tied our lives together with hair, a ritual of binding. Our names align one above the other." In that moment, I felt a secret little joy rising in my heart. 6 of the most beautiful words in this world leapt and twined together, clinging to each other. "Brother, last night I had a shameful dream. In the dream I called for you over and over again, desperately. I woke up with tears streaming down my face, soaking the pillow. Day and night, I think only of you. My performance was at the bottom, but it was Senior Gao who got dismissed. Brother, you helped me in secret, didn't you? I feel guilty and grateful all at once. How can I bear this? Beneath her words was Ethan's tender reply. Dearest wife, don't blame yourself. To comfort you is something I am willing to do with all my heart. I see through fame and fortune. What matters is this moment, when I hold my fist tight with gratitude that I still have you. There were 27 folders, each containing 30 documents, 810 files in total. 810 days and nights they had spent together, co-editing this so-called Eden of Beloved, pouring their hearts into it. It was just past September, late summer heat still lingering in the air. Yet I sat in the study, my whole body frozen, as though locked inside an ice cellar. In a haze, I rushed out the door. Subconsciously, I still couldn't believe Ethan would betray me. I wanted to think everything on that computer was fake, that someone malicious had planted it there to frame him. I called his phone, but no one answered. He had said he was at a department dinner. So I went from restaurant to restaurant searching, determined to confront him face to face. When I finally spotted him at a hot pot restaurant, the table was lively with conversation. He sat at the head of the table, lips curved in a faint smile, looking every bit the polished, elegant, successful man. On his right sat a long-haired woman in a white dress. She lowered her gaze shyly, graceful yet radiant. My steps faltered, and I couldn't bring myself to walk forward. The young people around the table joked. Ethan, we admire you in every way, but when it comes to being so tightly controlled by your wife, we can only keep our distance. That's right, Ethan, another chimed in. You're supposed to be the calm, lofty type. How could you listen to your wife, an outsider, about training new researchers? It took me a moment to understand what they meant. The truth was, Ethan was never good at management. His style was to take everything on himself, unwilling to waste time explaining to others. In the end, he exhausted himself, becoming the busiest, most overworked leader in the department, leaving no time even for his daughter. I had once suggested he should focus more on managing, let his subordinates do their work under strict review, otherwise the department's performance would always suffer. I didn't know exactly what Ethan had told them afterward, but from the sound of it, these young colleagues had laid the blame squarely at my feet. I didn't care about that now. My eyes were fixed on the long-haired woman. Sitting in the center of the group, her lips curved in a constant, gentle smile, she seemed poised and elegant, like a beauty standing apart in the noise of the hot pot restaurant. Just then, she laughed softly. All right, don't bully Ethan. If you're ever too busy, I'll lend a hand. The group burst into laughter. If our sister-in-law were like Danielle, our department would be heaven. What a pity, what a pity. My heart sank slowly. Of course it was her. The long-haired woman was Danielle. The group teased her with drinks, and her face bloomed pink like a peach blossom as she covered her cup, laughing sweetly. And then Ethan suddenly stood up. Ethan grabbed the wine glass from Danielle's hand and downed it in one gulp. In our department, women don't drink. Don't bully her. I'll drink. Danielle froze, then smiled faintly as she exchanged a look with him. The younger colleagues cheered, filling his glass again. He lifted it with bravado and drained it in one swallow. I stood watching from afar, my whole body shaking violently. Ethan's stomach had always been weak. Any little irritation would bring on terrible pain. Over the years, aside from caring for Mia, keeping his stomach healthy had been my top priority. I searched everywhere for remedies, boiled herbal teas, brewed tonics. Nothing cold, spicy, or greasy ever crossed his lips. I never put chili in my cooking. Even the watermelon in the fridge, I'd set it out ahead of time to warm before he came home from work. And as for alcohol, not a single drop was allowed. I had worked so hard, put so much thought into keeping his stomach well. Yet here he was, tossing back glass after glass without hesitation, all for the sake of earning a smile from his beloved. I couldn't hold back any longer. In moments of extreme fury, there is no calm, no rational weighing of pros and cons. My head roared as I charged forward, snatching the glass from Ethan's hand and smashing it against the floor. Bastard, I screamed. Ethan stared at me in shock. Danielle let out a frightened cry, stumbling 2 steps back and falling, her hand knocking over the boiling pot on the side cart. Hot oil splashed onto her face and forehead, and she shrieked in pain. Ethan's voice cracked as he shouted, "Danielle!" Everyone rushed toward her. Suddenly, a violent shove hit my shoulder. My balance gave out, and I crashed to the ground, my forehead slamming into the corner of the table. One of the young men glared at me with fury. "Where the hell did this crazy woman come from? You hurt someone. Don't think you can get away." I pressed my hand to my head, feeling a stream of hot liquid run down over my eyes. Through the veil of blood, I saw Ethan rushing toward me, panic in his face. I ignored him, screaming like a madwoman. "I saw the folder. I saw everything. You filthy pair of adulterers, absolutely disgusting." What happened afterward, every time I recall it over the past 3 months, feels unreal, like a nightmare. A nightmare I wish I could wake from. Overwhelmed, struck on the head, screaming with all the force of my rage, my heart gave out, and I fainted. When I woke up in the hospital, Ethan was sitting beside me, motionless, his head bowed low. My voice was weak but venomous. "Get out, don't let me see you, you make me sick." His body trembled. He lifted his unshaven face and looked at me. His voice was hoarse. "Lily, please don't get worked up, it's not what you think." I grabbed the thermos from the bedside table and hurled it at him. He didn't dodge. It hit him squarely, clattering to the floor with a heavy sound. He closed his eyes for a moment, then bent down, picked it up, and set it back in place. With a long sigh, he said, "If you want to hit me, curse me, do whatever you want. Things have come to this point, I won't defend myself anymore. But I just want you to know, Danielle and I never crossed the line." I glared at him, teeth clenched. "So what? Am I supposed to praise you for being noble? Am I supposed to thank you for not wallowing in the filth of a physical affair?" Ethan looked at me with a pained expression. "Do you have to say it in such ugly words?" My hand gripped the bedsheet tightly, trembling uncontrollably. "Ugly? What I said isn't half as disgusting as what you did. Every time I think about the things you two wrote, I want to vomit. Pretending to be some star-crossed lovers, some so-called platonic soulmates. What a joke. You're nothing but a shameless man and woman, a pair of lowlifes." In the past, whenever I read a novel or watched a TV drama where the heroine discovered her husband's betrayal and flew into a hysterical rage, I always scoffed. I thought those women were ruled by their emotions, too irrational, too undignified. I told myself, it's just a man, if he's dirty, throw him away. But now that it was happening to me, I realized I couldn't control myself at all. My whole chest was consumed by fury and betrayal. It felt as if I was about to explode, wanting to hurl every vile, poisonous word I knew at them, to drag him and that woman down into destruction with me. In an instant, I had gone from the optimistic, cheerful, warm-hearted Lily to a bitter, harsh, violent madwoman. Ethan looked at me then as if I really had lost my mind. The more he looked, the angrier I became. I grabbed the pillow and flung it at his face. "Get out," I shouted. He ran a hand through his messy hair, slowly straightening himself, then stood up. His voice had already calmed. "You're too agitated right now. We can't have a peaceful conversation like this. I'd better leave. About the one who shoved you, Gao already apologized to me. It's not really his fault, he didn't know who you were. You rushed in suddenly and scared Danielle, which is why she got hurt. He was just trying to stand up for her. Danielle's forehead was burned and left with a scar. But she doesn't intend to hold you responsible. You don't need to worry about that. In short, this isn't as disgraceful as you think. Calm down first. If you really can't get past this, then however you want to punish me, I won't complain." He bent down, placed the pillow back on the bed, then turned and walked out of the hospital room. I lay in the hospital for 3 days, my mind foggy, drifting in and out of sleep. Each time I woke, I needed a few seconds to tell whether I was in reality or still trapped in a nightmare. My mom came. She said Ethan had called her, explained everything in detail, and was worried I had no one to take care of me, so he asked her to help. Stroking my face, she sighed. He admitted his mistake sincerely. He swore nothing ever happened between him and that woman. "Lily, don't you remember how you used to chase after celebrities? You filled whole notebooks with confessions of love. Just think of it like that." I shook my head. "It's not the same." Mom frowned. "Still, you shouldn't wreck your health over this. Even if you don't think of yourself, think of Mia. Then my mother-in-law and sister-in-law came. They sat one on each side of my bed. My mother-in-law smiled and said, "Of course Ethan was wrong here, but he's always been good with women since he was little. Now that his career is successful, it's only natural outside women would target him. Maybe it's not such a bad thing this happened, it's not beyond saving. Consider it a warning." My sister-in-law sipped her iced Americano. "Sister-in-law, I'm not just taking my brother's side, but honestly, he's a man of sentiment. His character is solid. I suspect he was set up. And anyway, this doesn't really count as cheating. At worst, it's just flirting. Maybe not even that. He'd never use crude words like those men do." When my mother-in-law left, she looked at me earnestly. The fact that Ethan confessed on his own shows he still has a clear conscience. Of course, if you want to make a fuss, it's understandable. But it's better to let it end here. Ethan is about to compete for vice director. Outsiders don't know what's happening between you two. If rumors spread, it could hurt him. I didn't know what to do. Divorce? After more than 10 years of marriage? After all the effort I had poured into maintaining this family? After Mia's whole childhood, the image of happiness I had built for everyone else? To my mom, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, they only urged me not to get sick from anger. Not to disrupt family harmony. As if divorce had nothing to do with it. As if this kind of thing was far too trivial to warrant ending a marriage. But inside, I felt suffocated. Ethan came every day, carrying freshly cooked soup. When I ignored him, he would quietly set the thermos down and leave without a word. Mia called me several times, asking when I would come home, saying, "Mom, Dad's cooking tastes awful." I truly didn't know what to do. The day before I was discharged, I suddenly felt like getting some fresh air in the little garden downstairs. That's when I ran right into Ethan and Danielle. She was in a hospital gown, stroller, and he was carrying 2 thermos containers. The two of them were talking in low voices. They stood facing each other. A breeze blew from behind, sending Danielle's long hair fluttering across Ethan's face and lips. He didn't move, letting the strands brush gently against him, as if the moment itself carried some silent, unspoken intimacy. After a long while, he lowered his head and handed her one of the thermos containers. The wind carried her soft murmur. "Brother." My mind roared, and I rushed forward. The instant Ethan's pupils widened at the sight of me, I grabbed Danielle's hair and yanked her hard to the ground. "How dare you? How dare you show your face again, you slut?" I shouted. Danielle cried out in pain, clutching her hair. A few young colleagues came running in a panic. Seeing the scene, they tried to hold me back, explaining quickly, "Sister-in-law, you've misunderstood. We all came to visit Danielle, and it just happened that we ran into Ethan here." I raised my hand, ready to slap her across the face, when my wrist was suddenly seized. Ethan's cold voice sounded in my ear. "That's enough." The younger colleagues, embarrassed, tried to pry my hand loose from Danielle's hair, but I couldn't stop myself from clutching even tighter. A crowd had gathered around us, pointing and whispering. Danielle, flustered and ashamed, trembled as she held back sobs. Ethan looked at her with clear pain in his eyes, then turned to me, his gaze icy. He raised his voice. "I swear on our daughter Mia's life, I have never had any intimate relationship with her. No sex, no kisses, not even a hug. Lily, again and again you've refused to let this go. First you scarred her face, now you humiliate her in public. If you keep going on like this, we might as well get a divorce." My whole body jolted. I stared at him in shock. "What did you just say?" "Divorce? You think you have the right to say divorce?" The crowd began to murmur. If he dares to swear on his daughter, he must be telling the truth. I thought she was going after the mistress, but turns out she's the wife, throwing a scene and biting like a mad dog. And she scarred the poor girl's face too. Look at her, yanking hair like that. No wonder her husband wants to leave her. The man looks decent and honest. He must really have been pushed too far. All at once, I let go of Danielle's hair. A few of the younger men quickly pulled her away from me, shielding her. From behind the crowd, Danielle slowly raised her head and met my gaze. In her eyes was mockery, disdain, and even a trace of pity. Suddenly, I grew calm. From the moment I had discovered that folder until now, this was the first time I truly felt calm. I turned to Ethan and said slowly, "No, I don't agree to a divorce, at least not now." 2 days after I was discharged, Ethan finally came home. Mia had been taken to her grandmother's. I was sitting alone at the dining table, eating a simple bowl of noodles. He walked in, set down his coat, changed his shoes, and glanced at me. "I was out of town these past 2 days for a conference," he said flatly. I kept eating, not answering. He suddenly gave a short, cold laugh. "I know what you're thinking, but it's not as filthy as you imagine. If you don't believe me, you can check the conference's public news account. There's even a photo of me giving a speech." I drank the last sip of soup, stood up, and went to wash my bowl. When I came out, he was sitting on the sofa, one leg crossed over the other, his elbow resting on the armrest, his expression solemn, as if preparing for something important. "Lily," he said, "at this point, we need to have a serious talk." I finally looked at him. "Talk then." He stayed quiet for a long moment before continuing. "I admit this is my fault to begin with. But your reactions and behavior these past weeks have gone too far. Yesterday, Mia called me in tears, asking if we were fighting. Your emotions are already affecting our daughter. You can't keep throwing tantrums like this anymore," Ethan said. "These past 2 days I've been thinking. I've come up with 2 solutions and you can choose," I sneered. "Oh, and what brilliant solutions have you come up with?" The veins in his forehead pulsed, and at last he snapped. "Lily, I want you to approach this from the perspective of solving the problem, not from blind emotion. You've cursed me, you've hit me. Ask yourself, are we truly so unforgivable? If you really can't get past this, then we can divorce. You decide how to handle the money and the child. As long as you're not too excessive, I don't mind losing out." I swallowed down the storm rising in my chest and asked, "That's your first solution, and the second?" He stayed silent for a few seconds before continuing slowly. "For the sake of our child, we don't divorce. I promise you that from now on, all contact with Danielle will be kept strictly within normal work boundaries, but on one condition." I said nothing, waiting. He looked at me heavily. "Lily, you have to apologize to her." In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of unreality. It was as if the man in front of me wasn't Ethan, not the college sweetheart who once made my heart race, not the husband I had been married to for 10 years. For no reason, I laughed. So it was true. When you reach the point of utter speechlessness, you really can laugh. He closed his eyes, hiding some flicker of emotion, and when he spoke again, his tone was softer. "You probably think she's an ambitious woman trying to climb her way up, but you're wrong. Everything we did was born out of feelings, not calculation. She never wanted anything from me, never meant to hurt you. She even told me I should treat you more gently, give you more household money, because you've sacrificed a lot. But you've hurt her badly these past weeks. She's so young, and now there's a scar on her face. Do you realize how cruel that is for a girl her age? And then you humiliated her in front of everyone without distinguishing right from wrong. My colleagues told me she went home that night, so distraught she nearly took her own life. Lily, both emotionally and morally, you owe her an apology." I tilted my head, staring at him. "And how exactly do you want me to apologize?" He pressed his lips together. "I'll dial the number. You just need to say a few simple words. That's enough to put an end to this whole thing." He looked at me, let out a heavy sigh. "Once this blows over, we can still live well together. I'm about to be promoted to vice director. Our future will be bright." When Danielle's voice came through the phone, it trembled with excitement. "Brother, how did you know I was just thinking of you?" Ethan cut her off, his own voice quivering. "Danielle, Lily is here beside me. She wants to apologize for the harm she's caused you these past weeks. Just listen." There was a pause on the other end, then Danielle's tone grew steady. "I honestly don't mind any of that. Ethan, please don't ever mention divorce again. As long as your wife doesn't think of us as something dirty or disgraceful, I'll be satisfied." Ethan handed me the phone, his gaze heavy. I took it, and with deliberate calmness I said, "Hello, Danielle." "Sister-in-law," she answered politely. I smiled coldly and enunciated each word. "And what gives you the audacity to sit there and wait for my apology? Hiding your filth behind the mask of platonic love, pretending to be noble and pure, while you're nothing more than a shameless pair. Do you really think you're great? That you're high and holy? And now you even feel wronged?" "Wronged my ass. With words that brazen, you're shameless beyond measure. The two of you truly are a perfect match. Talking about those shameful dreams of calling out for him in the night, it was too hard to endure? You should have just told me directly. I could have delivered your precious brother. Right to your bed myself. Oh no. You two claim your love is noble and pure. How could you possibly do something so filthy? Aren't your parents elementary school teachers? They really did raise you to be oh so pure. I should send a banner to their school to thank them for producing such a fine daughter. Danielle shrieked through the phone. Lily, how dare you? Ethan roared and lunged to snatch the phone, but I swung hard and struck him square in the face. Blood trickled from both nostrils. I sneered. Ethan, don't think you can escape. I've already compiled the nauseating evidence from the past 2 years into a PDF. I sent it, neatly packaged, to your institute's director, the party secretary, and the union chair, just an hour before you walked through that door. You finished doting on your so-called only wife. Now you'd better start worrying about how to deal with your own mess tomorrow. Ethan froze in disbelief, his face draining pale like a wrinkled sheet of paper. The consequences came quickly. Ethan was stripped of his candidacy for vice director, relieved of his leadership duties, and transferred out of the core research group. Danielle was reassigned to the institute's logistics department, no longer allowed to participate in any research projects. The director explained to me that after all, nothing physical had occurred, and since the documents were only TDF files, in theory, they couldn't serve as definitive proof. There could be no public announcement, only an internal disciplinary measure. I understood. The truth was, for him to go this far already pushed the limits of what was possible, and it was only thanks to the goodwill I'd built back then, trekking across half the city with my homemade desserts. Afterward, Ethan, once so proud and unyielding, was forced to bow his head to fate, yet not in the way I did. When he looked at me, his eyes were filled with disappointment and finality, as though he couldn't believe that I, the woman who had always placed him at the very center of my life, could be so ruthless, so merciless. After all, in his mind, he hadn't really done anything. With a tone heavy with exhaustion, "For our marriage, for me," he said, "if this is what you wanted, then you've gotten your wish." Then he gave a faint, mocking smile, packed his things, and moved back to his mother's house. The very next morning, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law pounded furiously on my door. "Lily, you went too far. Over such a small matter, you had to destroy him completely? You know how much effort my brother put into his career to reach this point. Do you have no heart at all?" My sister-in-law demanded angrily. My mother-in-law glared at me. "Lily, I'm so disappointed in you. At such a critical moment in Ethan's career, you stabbed him in the back. Husband and wife rise together, and they fall together. I never imagined you'd be so cruel to your own husband, to show him no loyalty at all." I answered steadily, "And did he show me loyalty? You might not believe it, but he actually asked me to apologize to that woman. I didn't cause this. Ethan did. If he had the courage to cheat, he should also have the courage to face the consequences. Isn't that right?" "That's not cheating," my mother-in-law said in disbelief. "At most, it was just emotional." "Emotional cheating isn't cheating," my sister-in-law scoffed. I shot her a cold look. "Would you accept it if your husband called another woman his only wife?" Her eyes widened, and she snapped, "If he dared, I'd crush him." My own mother came too, looking both angry and pained. "Lily, you're being foolish. They didn't actually cross the line. You should just swallow this. Let him go this once. That way, you'll always have the upper hand. Now look what you've done. He's not completely ruined, but neither did you gain anything. You acted far too impulsively. A woman, no matter how strong, still needs someone to rely on. I'm telling you, go bring Ethan back right now. Even if you won't think of others, you should at least think of your daughter." My eyes burned red, but my voice was steady. "Mom, have you ever thought about your own daughter? I know I can't destroy him completely, but the thought of those two living every day so polished, so radiant, while I'm left to choke on this pain, my heart feels pierced by needles. They did wrong. Why should they get to live so well, while I suffer every single day? Mom, the anger in me has nowhere to go. I feel suffocated." I was in so much pain. These past 2 days I came to a realization. No matter if we eventually divorce or not, no matter what consequences I'll have to bear or what losses I'll suffer, there was one thing I had to do first. I had to let out my anger, at any cost. If I couldn't release it, my heart would never feel at peace. And if my heart wasn't at peace, my mind would never be still. In living through this, I finally understood all those wives I'd seen in the past, those who caught their husband's mistress red-handed and broke down hysterically, shouting, fighting without any regard for dignity. I used to think they were shameless. But now I knew. They weren't always like that. Once, they too had been warm, optimistic women who loved life and loved their families. But when betrayal comes from the closest person in your life, when the world you entrusted yourself to suddenly collapses, when you face the fury of having been deceived and the terror of an unknown future, at that moment, the rawest, most painful, most effective release is to lash out. I admire those who can walk away from betrayal calmly, who can say goodbye with dignity, file for divorce without hesitation, turn and leave without looking back. But I couldn't. Or maybe I could, but I knew I couldn't guarantee I'd always be able to. I was afraid that in the countless nights ahead, the emotions would rebound and I'd regret it. Regret not slapping her, not yanking her hair, regret holding back for the sake of some ridiculous notion of dignity, letting my rage fester and poison the rest of my life. No. I had to release it then and there. I wasn't wrong. I was the victim. They were the ones without dignity, so why should I cling to some illusion of it? It wasn't about punishing them. It was about saving myself. My future life deserved to be good, to be calm. I couldn't let this filth stain my emotions even a little. And in some twisted way, just knowing their lives weren't easy now gave me relief. At least my hands no longer trembled during the day. At least breathing no longer burned my throat. At least I could sleep at night again. When I picked Mia up, the other mothers somehow already knew. They gathered around, offering comfort. I didn't expect this to happen in your family too. Looks like men really are all the same. One mother said, Mia's mom, I can't believe you reported your husband to his institute directly. I really admire you, but won't he hold it against you forever? I answered, if he does, so what? Worst case, we divorce. Everyone's faces showed shock. Divorce? Isn't that too extreme? You can't act on impulse like that. If you divorce, aren't you just handing him over to that other woman? Why should you suffer through all the hardships and then let some outsider enjoy the good times? Another chimed in. That's right, as long as you've let out your anger, it's enough. These days, a man who brings home money and still comes back at night, that's already pretty good. Most of them fool around outside anyway. Compared to others, your husband is still decent. Their pushback and lack of understanding, I could bear it. Just as he had to face the consequences of his betrayal, I had to face the consequences of venting my rage. It was fair. Just personal choices. I'd already expected this. Except, one night, after Ethan had moved out, I was about to go to bed when I suddenly saw Mia standing at the doorway in her pajamas. Her eyes were red as she stared at me. Mom, did you drive Dad away? Her gaze startled me. It wasn't the gaze of a 7-year-old girl. It carried grievance, blame, even a trace of hatred. I rushed to pull her into my arms, but she turned her body coldly, dodging my hand so it hovered in the air. I had never seen Mia like this. She felt like a stranger. I had raised Mia almost single-handedly. Back when Ethan was consumed by his career, so busy he was barely ever home, Mia would ask me sadly, "Does Dad not want us anymore?" And I had looked into her eyes and answered firmly, "Of course Dad wants to be with us, but he works so hard every day to give us a warm home. We must love him and understand him." Do you remember that? Yes, Mom, I remember. Later, I even went to Ethan and talked with him about it. After that, no matter how busy he was, he always made sure to spend at least half an hour each day interacting with Mia. Storytelling or playing games, Mia looked forward to that precious half hour with her father every single day. Their bond grew stronger and stronger. But one evening, she looked at me with her tear-swollen eyes and said, "Grandma and Auntie said it's you who drove Daddy away. They said you even made him lose his job even though he worked so hard. Daddy's so good, but you treated him so badly. Why, Mom? Why did you do this to Dad?" As she spoke, she suddenly shoved me hard with both hands, then burst into loud sobs. "I want Daddy to come home. I don't care, you have to make him come back or I won't love you anymore." The chill inside me spread slowly through my entire body. After a long pause, I sat down on the edge of the bed and asked softly, "What else did Grandma and Auntie tell you?" With her eyes red and puffy, Mia cried out, "Daddy has nothing to do with that other lady. You're just being petty. You just want a new dad." "Anything else?" My voice was so cold and heavy, even I barely recognized it. Mia must never have seen me like that. She froze, forgot to cry, and obediently answered. "Auntie asked me if Danielle is pretty. She asked if I would like it if Danielle became my mom." My nails dug sharply into my palm. "Mia, when have you seen Danielle?" "Lots of times. Sometimes when Daddy picked me up, she'd be sitting in the car. She even asked me if I wanted to ride home with them. I said yes." "When Auntie asked if you wanted Danielle to be your mom, was Daddy there?" "Yes. And what did he say?" "Nothing. He didn't say anything." I closed my eyes, forcing the hot rush of blood in my body to calm down. "Mia, if Daddy and I separated, who would you choose?" Her tears rolled down one by one, fat drops sliding down her cheeks. She sobbed, "Mom, you're not allowed to leave Daddy. If you don't want Daddy, then I'll choose him. I won't choose you." That night I lay awake staring wide-eyed at the ceiling, sleepless until dawn. The next day I called Ethan. "Mia misses you. Come home." He was silent on the other end, and so was I. But I knew he would agree. The director had already spoken with him, considering that his misconduct wasn't severe, and given his outstanding research skills and achievements, as long as he could properly resolve the family conflict, all the disciplinary measures against him could be lifted. "For Mia, I'll come back," he finally said, his voice weary, cold yet threaded with fatigue. "But there's one condition: you have to apologize to Danielle." He paused. "Lily, you've vented your anger already. For the sake of our child, for the 10 years of marriage we've shared, let's just stop here. Don't bring it up again. Don't ever say Danielle's name again." I agreed. Ethan moved back home. Mia was overjoyed. She clung to him, laughing and shouting. After a while, she saw me sitting alone on the sofa, came over with her eyes red, hugged me, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." In the 3 months since Ethan returned, we have been like the most familiar strangers under one roof. I stayed in the master bedroom, he slept in the study. Before, I used to cook and wait for him to eat together. Now, I dipped into our savings and hired a part-time cook. His position still hadn't been restored, so he usually came home on time. But I had grown busy. I registered for an important industry exam, one that if I passed, would greatly improve my future chances for promotion. Before, between work in the day and caring for Mia at night, I never had the time to study and didn't dare register. But now Ethan had more free time. He washed the dishes, he spent time with Mia. As soon as I finished dinner, I would shut myself in the room, devoting myself fully to my studies. I had to seize these precious 3 months to study and to heal. Of course, sometimes I still broke down. Sometimes I couldn't hold it in and said Danielle's name, and sometimes he couldn't hold back either and vented the pressure bottled up inside him. But we were adults. By the next day, we always returned to the way we were supposed to be. One evening, he asked me calmly, "Is your exam finished?" I smiled faintly. "I finished half a month ago." I hadn't had much time to think about attending the company's Family Day event, but when Ethan and I showed up that morning, the room went quiet for a split second. Every pair of eyes turned to me, sizing me up with careful, expressionless stares that weren't exactly friendly. Ethan had built a strong image for himself at the Institute over the years, polished, respectable, easygoing with his subordinates. The younger staff admired him greatly. When the story of his solemn oath in the hospital spread back through the Institute, people were full of sympathy. Yes, his affair with Danielle was wrong, but at least it had remained pure and restrained. Compared to the many men who abandoned their wives and children without consequence, this didn't seem like much. Their so-called love born from restraint wasn't approved of, but it was understood. The gossip said Ethan's wife was a shrew, while Danielle was a fragile young woman who never stood a chance against me. First, I scarred her face, then I humiliated her in public. A promising graduate researcher was relegated to the logistics department. Too steep a price to pay. These rumors were told to me by the institute director's mother herself, back when I still delivered her desserts. Yes, I kept delivering them, though I stopped telling Ethan since he disdained the idea. After I sent out the PDF report, the director's mother personally called and invited me to her home. She was a kindly, cheerful old woman who loved to gossip. "Do you regret it?" she asked. My eyes reddened, but I shook my head. "No, I had to let that anger out." She smiled. "You're a lot like me when I was younger." 2 years ago, I had accidentally learned that this seemingly harmless old woman had once been a high-ranking provincial official. She winked at me and said, "But you're still not quite like me. No matter what difficulties I faced in life, I never gave up on myself." My eyes dimmed, and I whispered, "Back then, I stepped back mainly for the family, for the child. I had no choice but to take a supporting role." Was it really no choice? Her wrinkled eyes gleamed with sharpness. Were those problems truly impossible to solve? I froze. She smiled knowingly. "We women often claim sacrifice for family as a reason, but sometimes it's just an excuse we use to avoid external competition and the burden of social pressure." Her words struck me like a hammer, so hard it left me trembling. On the way home, I broke out in a sweat, asking myself again and again, were they really impossible to solve? That sleepless night, clarity finally came. That was the day I began searching for a housekeeper, checking exam schedules, buying study materials. Now as my gaze swept over the crowd, this restless, polite sea of faces, I found my eyes drawn to the elderly woman in the center of the room, calmly eating cake with a fork. My steps grew lighter as I walked over to greet her with composure. The director spotted me and beamed. "Lily, you're here. Good, come help me. Mom's eating too many sweets again." Gasps rippled through the room. Shock spread across every face. Clearly none of them knew how well I knew the director's family. Even Ethan looked wide-eyed and uneasy, following behind me stiffly. The old woman grasped my hand warmly, leaning close to whisper in my ear, "I came today to support you." This research institute was funded by private capital, and the director was its largest shareholder. His mother was essentially the true authority behind it all. My eyes stung with sudden heat. Ethan lingered awkwardly nearby. Social settings were never his strength, but since the director had told him his career could only be restored if his family was stable and harmonious, he had no choice but to stand by my side. Just then, I saw Danielle. She walked straight toward us with a plate of pastries, her posture rigid yet fragile, her expression a mix of weakness and pride. A bandage covered her forehead. "Madam, these are desserts I personally prepared on behalf of the logistics department," she said softly. I looked at her in silence. Danielle stopped right beside Ethan, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. I couldn't tell if it was coincidence or the subtle provocation of a delicate woman. The director's mother frowned. "I have diabetes. I can't eat what you brought." Danielle's eyes flicked toward the half-eaten cake in front of her. "But isn't dessert your favorite?" The director's mother's face stayed flat. "What I ate was a xylitol cake Lily baked for me herself. That's not the same as the overly sweet junk from outside." The hall buzzed with chatter and games, but everyone's glances kept drifting our way. Her words carried an edge of mockery. And Danielle's face flushed red. Embarrassed, she instinctively looked toward Ethan. He didn't move. Today he was here to show a picture of family harmony. Naturally, he wouldn't risk anything inappropriate. Danielle's expression twisted with disappointment and grievance. Then, as if gathering all her courage, she lifted her head, locked her eyes on me, and spoke. "Mrs. Smith, I want to sincerely apologize to you today. I admired Ethan, so I said things I shouldn't have. I'm sorry, but I swear, nothing between Ethan and me ever crossed moral boundaries. I never did anything to betray a third person, and I've already paid the price. Please, I beg you, don't suppress me any further. My parents worked so hard to put me through graduate school. I just want to make use of what I've learned." Her voice caught at the end, trembling, fragile, pitiable. The two of them stood side by side, heads bowed slightly toward me, looking for all the world, like a pair of unjustly wronged lovers. Around us, I caught glimpses of sympathy on people's faces. I suddenly laughed. "Miss Danielle, the price you paid, what exactly do you mean by that?" She looked at me with an expression that seemed to say I already knew. I pointed at her forehead. "This injury? That day I was furious, yes, but I never laid a finger on you. I don't know whether it was guilt or nerves, but the moment you saw me, you stumbled back on your own and hit the floor. Miss Danielle, then why is everyone saying I disfigured you, that I pushed you down? Her eyes shimmered with tears. She lowered her voice. If you say it's that way, then it's that way. A few of the young researchers who'd been there couldn't hold back. One of them blurted out, even if you had reason, you can't hurt someone and then refuse to admit it. I turned toward the voice and raised a brow. You're Gao, aren't you? He froze, clearly not expecting me to know his name. You're the one who shoved me that day, the reason I got hurt, he stammered. I didn't know you back then. I just couldn't stand seeing someone strike out, so I stepped in. I've already apologized to Ethan. Apologized to Ethan? My tone went cold. I was the one injured. I glanced at the group clustered together. Ethan's former subordinates. Every face burned with indignation, clearly siding with Danielle and thinking I was relentless. I turned to look at Ethan. His face angled slightly, his eyes glancing sideways at Danielle, whose expression was all restrained tears and tragic dignity. I smiled faintly, reached into my bag and handed Ethan his phone. You left this in the car, I brought it in for you. Oh, and I also sent the surveillance footage from that hot pot restaurant to the group chat. The room erupted in murmurs as everyone pulled out their phones. The video was crystal clear and proved two things. First, I never touched Danielle, something she herself should know perfectly well. Second, it was Gao who deliberately shoved me, causing me to fall and sustain a mild concussion as the doctor had diagnosed. I'll be expecting a formal apology, I said evenly, and financial compensation. When I sent the video, my hand slipped and the PDF file went out with it. But honestly, I thought your writing was quite something. Letting everyone take a look isn't necessarily a bad thing. The only reason Ethan and Danielle were still able to enjoy their calm days at the Research Institute was because no one had actually seen the evidence. They just heard rumors, assumed the two of them were a little too close, and thought I, the wife, had exploded out of jealousy. Since the leaders didn't want the Institute's reputation affected, they kept the evidence quiet. So I had to release it myself. Ethan's face froze, golden with shock, as his trembling fingers opened his phone. The murmurs had already started spreading through the room. She really didn't touch her. Danielle fell by herself. But didn't everyone say it was Ethan's wife who pushed her? Danielle herself let it slide, didn't she? That shove Gao gave was brutal. There was blood. Danielle's face turned deathly pale, her lips trembling. She suddenly raised her voice. It was so chaotic then. I couldn't even tell who pushed me, but someone did. I wasn't lying. I just didn't see clearly. The director's mother handed the phone back to her son, speaking slowly. So it was just you and someone else's husband standing together. Everyone else was far away. If it wasn't Ethan's wife and it wasn't you, well, then it must have been Ethan. Ethan, so it was you who pushed her. Ethan's expression stiffened in shock, unable to reply. The room erupted instantly. The Institute employees didn't dare speak too directly, but the family members had no such restraint. The sharpest, ugliest words filled the air. Looks all proper on the surface, but really scheming, huh? Trying to steal someone's husband and frame the wife on top of it? Ugh, look at that PDF, what page is that? Gross. I can't even read this part in public, I'll save it for later. His subordinates exchanged looks, their faces dark. Those who had brought girlfriends were put on the spot. This is the sweet, kind Sister Danielle you kept praising? What's really going on between you two? The whole room was split, some still watching the video, some already flipping through the PDF. But none of them looked at Ethan or Danielle with respect anymore. Their gazes were mocking, disdainful. Danielle's body shook until she couldn't bear it. She gave a strangled sob, covered her face, and fled the hall. Ethan stood rigid, head bent over his phone, not daring to lift his eyes again. When we got home, Ethan's face was stormy, his voice sharp and cruel. He sneered, I told you, I only came back on the condition that this matter was put to rest. You didn't do it. I smiled lightly. Yes, I broke my word. Do what you want. Ethan was silent for a long time, then looked at me with a gaze full of grief that was heavier than anger. Then we can only divorce. I nodded. Fine. Shock flickered across his face, disbelief breaking through his stiff expression. I walked into the bedroom, pulled out a folder, and handed it to him. Here's the divorce agreement. Look it over and see if there's anything you want to change. His eyes widened. He took it stiffly, teeth clenched. When did you prepare this? I narrowed my eyes, thought for a moment, and said evenly, Oh, on Mia's birthday. The same day you had dinner with Danielle. Ethan's whole body shuddered, his face turning ghostly white as he stared at me. On the 87th day since he had moved back home, I checked my exam results online. The bright red word passed stared back at me. I broke down, crying until I couldn't breathe. Then I dialed Danielle's number. Half an hour later, I sat across from her in a cafe, my eyes swollen and red from tears. Her long hair still flowed over her shoulders, and when she looked at me, the corner of her lips lifted with a mocking smile. So, even though he moved back in, your life hasn't been much better, has it? I ground my teeth. It's still better than yours. At least I'm not a temp worker now. She let out a faint, breezy laugh. If you came today to see me humiliated, then you're wrong. I may have lost my position for now, but there's still a chance to get it back. I'm not in a hurry. I felt my anger rising. So you're just waiting for Ethan to be reinstated so he can pull you back up? She leaned in and asked softly, He's your husband. Don't you know better than anyone what he'll do? My eyes burned red, my voice trembling. I don't believe it. I don't believe Ethan has such deep feelings for you. We've been married for 10 years. We have Mia. Even if he doesn't care about me, wouldn't he at least care about Mia? She gave a faint smile. What he and I share is a connection of the soul. One day with me is worth your 10 years. To be blunt, I just don't care enough to fight you. But if I truly wanted to, you wouldn't stand a chance. I gritted my teeth in fury. Fine, let's bet. In 2 days, it's Mia's birthday. If you have the ability, make him skip his daughter's birthday to be with you. If he chooses to stay home, then you're nothing but a joke. Her eyes lifted slightly, calm and confident. And if he chooses me, I clenched my jaw. Then I'll stand in front of the entire institute and publicly admit defeat to you. She smiled with full confidence. Deal. I glared at her. Deal. On the night of Mia's birthday, after she had called Ethan for the 10th time asking when he was coming home, his phone went dead. Mia's eyes filled with tears, her lips pressed tight as she stayed silent. I looked at the photo Danielle had just sent me, then gently asked, Do you want Mommy to take you to find Daddy? Mia nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. When we arrived at the restaurant, Ethan and Danielle were walking out side by side, their faces tinged with intimacy, reluctant to part. Suddenly Danielle called out, Brother, and threw herself into his arms. The two of them embraced tightly. Mia bit her lip, staring at them, tears streaming down her face. A quiet sigh slipped from my chest. I had never wanted to drag my child into the mess adults create. But when Mia cried that day, begging to choose her father over me, I realized she was already caught inside. Her words had broken my heart, yet when I searched myself, I knew I could never give up the daughter I had raised with my own hands since birth. She had always depended on me, just as she depended on her father. She had only been misled by poisonous voices from others. She still needed me, and I needed her. So let her see life's cruelty early. It doesn't matter, as long as she stays by my side, I'll teach her how to shine, how to stand tall, how to face the mud of life with courage. Back in the present, Ethan's face was pale as he explained in the meeting room. Danielle said we needed a formal goodbye. That's all it was. I owed her that much, so I smiled slowly. So when you cheat, the one you feel sorry for is your lover? Fine. I don't mind, but Mia might take longer to recover. His face went blank. What do you mean? Why would Mia need time? My voice was steady and calm. Because that night, you and Danielle embraced for over half an hour, and Mia and I saw it with our own eyes. Haven't you noticed how cold she's been toward you these past few days? It was only after she told me herself, if you and Dad divorce, I'll stay with Mom, that I finally signed the divorce papers. Ethan's lips trembled, his voice hoarse. No, you're wrong. It was just a farewell hug. That's all. Lily, you deliberately brought Mia there, didn't you? She's your own daughter. How could you be so cruel? I looked at him with utter contempt, at the man who had been entwined in my life since girlhood, and said coldly, You're always like this. You stray in our marriage, yet you blame me for being merciless. You hurt me, yet you call me hysterical. You choose your mistress over your daughter's birthday, yet you accuse me of letting her see your true face. I regret every year I wasted on you. The so-called paradise you built was nothing more than a sham built on my sacrifices. You're a hypocrite. And selfish. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Ethan, I looked down on you. What I didn't expect was that Ethan actually refused the divorce. That morning, I woke up in a good mood, only to see him sitting on the couch with his head hanging low, as if he hadn't slept all night. When he saw me, he suddenly stood up and slowly dropped to his knees before me. With a pitiful smile, he said, "Lily, I won't divorce you. I never intended to be with Danielle. What we had was only an exchange of thoughts and feelings, a way for me to relax under years of work pressure. What happened this time was my fault, completely my fault. The times I asked for a divorce before were only because I knew you wouldn't agree. But last night, I thought about it all night. Lily, I love you. I love Mia. Please give me one more chance. I swear I'll treat you both well for the rest of my life and never betray you again." I broke down, stunned by his shamelessness, and roared, "Danielle is your one and only wife in this life? How dare you say you never thought of being with her? Then what about those hundreds of files? What about all those tender, lingering exchanges between you two? What about the divorce plan I've pushed forward step by step all this time?" Ethan was a stubborn man. He seemed determined to prove his words with actions. From that day forward, he got up early every morning to make breakfast. Mia and I didn't even look at him. I went to work, she went to school, and we barely exchanged words with him. During the day, he would send me random updates, a perfect leaf that had fallen on the road, what he ate for lunch, some theory he had suddenly figured out. At night, he washed the dishes, did the chores, and said goodnight to us over and over before bed, patient and persistent. I couldn't stand it any longer and went to see Danielle again. When I met him, I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost a lot of weight, his cheekbones protruding sharply, with dark yellow eye bags, lines carved deep on both sides of his nose, and lips drooping down involuntarily. He looked nothing like the delicate, soft young man I had first seen at the hot pot restaurant. Now, he seemed almost bitter. "Lily, you lied to me. You still have the nerve to come to me?" he said coldly, staring at me. I thought for a moment and understood. He was referring to the bet I had agreed to, that I would publicly admit defeat in front of everyone at the Institute. But instead, I had broken my word and leaked the surveillance video from the hot pot restaurant. "Yes, I did lie to you about that," I admitted, honestly. He clenched his teeth, speaking each word with hatred. "You ruined me. I can't stay at the Institute anymore. Everyone looks at me differently. I can't stand being there another day. And even now, when I've fallen this low, why did you have Ethan take back the money he gave my mom for her treatment?" I sneered. "So Ethan gave you money? I thought this was supposed to be some noble platonic bond between you two. How come it involves money? Don't tell me you're just another mistress out for cash." He flared up. "It was for my mom's treatment." "Just that. Don't make me sound like one of those cheap women outside who live off men. I'm not that low." Curious, I asked, "So how much did he take back?" He laughed coldly. "Don't play dumb. Wasn't it you who told him to demand the entire $200,000 back?" I exhaled slowly, leaning against the chair, and suddenly found it almost laughable. All those years of scrimping and saving, working myself to exhaustion just to build some security, yet Ethan had handed over $200,000 to him with a mere wave of his hand. But compared to my hysterical rage before, now it only felt faintly ridiculous. I tilted my head at Danielle. "And you couldn't pay back $200,000? He snapped. "I told you it was used for my mom's treatment. The money's gone." I stayed silent for a few seconds. "If you really don't want to return it, I suppose there's still another way." A month later, the director's mother suddenly called me. "Lily, are you all right?" Surprised, I said, "I'm fine. Why?" She told me something explosive. At work, Ethan had been assaulted by Danielle's parents. They had barged right in, each landing a slap, knocking him to the ground on the spot. Danielle stood there crying while his father roared that Ethan had gotten his innocent daughter pregnant and now wanted to use money to make her get rid of the baby. Danielle's father shouted that Ethan had to take responsibility, otherwise they would cling to him for life. Nobody believed it at first, asking if there had been some mistake. But Danielle raised his voice and declared there was no mistake at all. The child in her belly belonged to Ethan. When Ethan heard that, he suddenly turned vicious, cursing Danielle and accusing him of deliberately seducing him with drugs, tricking him into bed. But Danielle was no coward. He snapped back. If the first time was with drugs, then what about the second and the third? Were those times drugged too? After hanging up the phone, I sat in stunned silence for a long while. That day, when I had told Danielle that if he couldn't pay the money back, there was another way, he had asked me what way. I told him, then just take Ethan from me. My intention was for him to help me push the divorce forward, but I never expected him to choose such an extreme path. For a moment, I couldn't even believe it. Thinking back to those passionate, heated words they had written in those intimate letters files, I felt only absurdity and bitter irony. Ethan had once spoken to me so firmly, insisting I shouldn't think of them as so despicable, swearing their bond was nothing more than a pure, spiritual connection that never crossed the line. But now that so-called sacred love had fallen from its pedestal, rotting in the mud. And me, the lawful wife, once shrieking and hysterical in my despair, when I heard such explosive news now, I felt only that time had changed, and people with it. There was no rage left, only a sigh of lament. Ethan and I divorced. He didn't want the property or even custody of our daughter. He chose to leave with nothing. On the day the cooling-off period ended, he signed the papers with his eyes rimmed red, saying not a word. From the first time he went to bed with Danielle, to the second and the third, he knew himself he no longer had the face to speak a single word to me. At the final parting, he fixed his gaze on me for a few seconds, then lowered his head and turned away. Later, his mother and sister came to make a scene, saying the division of assets was unfair, demanding to split things again. But Ethan, arriving late and nearly collapsing with grief, roared at them, "Do you want to drive me to death?" What came after I only heard from others. At 8 months pregnant, under the pressure of Danielle's parents, Ethan still married her. There was no wedding banquet, only a simple marriage license. A month later, Danielle gave birth to a son with cerebral palsy, likely a consequence of that drugged night. Everyone sighed that it was all karmic retribution, but the one who suffered most was the child. Ethan didn't leave the institute, but he never held a managerial post again, remaining only a basic researcher. Danielle never returned to work after becoming pregnant, and after the birth it was even more impossible. Her parents moved in from their hometown to help care for the child. On Ethan's meager monthly salary of $12,000, he had to support 4 adults and a child who needed constant therapy and training. Meanwhile, my career surged ahead. After reapplying for my post, I achieved the top performance results in the entire company that year. My salary multiplied several times, and I led a much larger team. Mia was doing well. I happily hired a young full-time nanny to cook for her and help with homework, with my mother occasionally helping as well. I finally understood, women must rely on themselves to stand strong. Having lived through her parents' divorce, Mia was more mature than her peers, though still cheerful, optimistic, and warm, very much like me. I was deeply grateful that I hadn't given up on her. 2 years later, I ran into Ethan and Danielle again. I had taken Mia to the hospital to see the director's mother after she sprained her ankle, and as we came out, we bumped into them head-on in the lobby. The two of them were loudly quarreling in front of everyone. Holding Mia's hand, I stood among the onlookers, startled by how much they had changed. Danielle had withered into a bitter, shrunken figure, her lips pressed into a thin line, corners drooping, her face twisted as she shouted, "Bullshit. Your family's useless. Everything depends on my parents working themselves to death raising this child. What right do your people have to act high and mighty in front of us? And you dare to call my parents 2 old hags?" Ethan's face was dark, wearing the jacket I had bought him years ago. At only 35, his hair was already streaked with gray, making him look weary and aged. His lips moved with no hesitation as he spat back. "Bullshit yourself. Your whole family is nothing but trash. Parasites, you drain me dry and now you want to drain my family too." The cost of the child's treatments was so high, and yet Danielle's whole family lived off Ethan, eating his food, staying under his roof, while keeping every penny of their pensions untouched. And still, they had the nerve to complain that what he earned wasn't enough. As Ethan turned his head in frustration, his eyes suddenly locked with mine. In an instant, he went silent. His lips trembled slightly, his gaze tangled with emotions, panic, shame, helplessness. Mia softly called out, "Daddy." Ethan's body gave a small shudder. Slowly, he lifted his hand as if to reach out and touch her, but it froze halfway in the air. Then, with a sudden cry, he shoved his way out of the crowd and disappeared. On the drive home, I noticed Mia sitting quietly the whole time, not saying a word. Worried that what she had witnessed at the hospital might have affected her, I carefully asked, "Mia, what are you thinking about? You can tell Mommy." She tilted her head and slowly replied, "Mom, I was just thinking, your name is really beautiful." I hadn't expected that was what had been on her mind, and I couldn't help but feel stunned. Beautiful? Mommy always thought her name was too plain, too ordinary. I even cried about it when I was little. Mia shook her head with a child's earnestness and began to recite in her tender voice, "Peach blossoms smile through the spring garden, wine battles with the night for a place in the heart." Then she added, "Mom, isn't that the most beautiful picture?" The car sped down the highway, spring sunlight pouring outside the window. Peach trees and plum blossoms bloomed in brilliant colors, the world alive and thriving. Yes, my name truly was beautiful after all. Smiling, I said aloud, "The story is complete."